This was a cumulative assignment over 2 weeks. The first week we completed Tiers Part 1, in which we included strategies, Tier 1 and 2 strategies. So in Tiers Part 2, we added Tier 3 strategies to that. So 2 weeks to complete this paper. The purpose of it was to explore the benefits of three-tiered models and think about them in terms of our students' needs, the school's needs, and other schools that we knew of. It was also a chance to connect strategies within each tier and think about the students that I have and which strategies might connect to specific needs. And finally, it was a chance to connect theory to practice in that same way, thinking about the needs of our students and how the strategies at each level might apply. The requirements of the paper were met by backing up each thing that we included in the paper with research that we had viewed in the first weeks of the course. And what I found was that at this point in the master's degree program, I still had some things to learn about APA formatting. Many of the errors, or many of the corrections rather, that I made were in relation to APA formatting that have been cleaned up in this artifact. At first, I felt overwhelmed because we had gone through a ton of research. And in exploring the tiered systems, I found a couple of things that calmed my anxiety about implementing them and allowed me to implement them very quickly. And to use those as when you're considering Tier 1 and 2 and even Tier 3 strategies, so that we're not working ourselves harder but rather smarter. The second thing that calmed me a little bit is that this is a process, and we're based on the data that we collect. This is going to be continually tweaked, and so it's not just a one-time thing that it has to be implemented exactly as it's always going to be, but rather, once it's implemented, we're going to note the effects, collect data, and make adjustments as we go. In thinking about the deficits we see in behavior, performance, acquisition, or fluency, this was the first time I had considered fluency outside of reading. And so I thought about that we had discussed, particularly in vocabulary acquisition. There's a difference between receptive and expressive vocabulary. I wondered if maybe, particularly for my students with significant disabilities, if maybe it was the case that they were gaining an understanding by the use of Tier 1 and 2 strategies, but weren't, maybe it would take a while for them to be able to implement those, particularly on their own. And so we kept with it. Another thing that I thought about from this assignment is that while I had heard the phrase teachers need to adjust their behavior before we need to think about adjusting our students' behaviors, I didn't have a variety of meaningful examples to draw upon. And so, over the work of this paper, we saw lots of examples at each tier. I started offering my students more choices throughout the day. I started building in things like universal design for learning, particularly for the way that they were being assessed. Or at least I started to. Throughout the program, we built our understanding of UDL principles a great deal, but this was the start. In the introduction, I mentioned that I hadn't taken a course on behavior. I had taken a couple of trainings through PCMA and CPI, although both of those were for hands-on training. And as part of that, as a preventative measure to that, we discussed the acting out cycle, although it wasn't as in-depth as the course material. The IRIS module was wonderful and had a great depth and explanations. So I thought In relation to, or compared to, the Tier 1 and 2 strategies, the while the acting out cycle is absolutely important for teachers to know and understand and be able to react to, it's just that it's reactive. It's not really preventative. And those were the trainings that staff at our school has taken, and that was the way we were thinking about prevention, was by reacting to changes in the acting out cycle, as opposed to building in those tier 1 and 2 strategies or embedding them in our classrooms. So it was only once I began to embed tier 1 and 2 strategies that I could really say that I am prevention focused. The final thing that I thought about was that our students spend so many hours at school over the course of their lifetime, and at the center school, the students can stay and often do until age 22. And so if we're not allowing, or if we're not embedding tier 1 and 2 strategies, we're really preventing an optimal quality of life while they're in school. And of course, that has significant ramifications for the amount that they're able to learn that pertains to their life after school. So this paper and the fact that I was connecting it to the students' quality of life and really allowing access to the elements of the curriculum and learning that are important going on in my classroom. This was one of those first assignments that really fostered my love of learning about behavior, and I took this course very seriously. And this is that paper that began that love of working with students who exhibit challenging behaviors. And that only grew throughout the course and throughout the program as well.